Does anyone really need that many iPads? What do you think, Sept? Do you need so many iPads?
Yes.
Okay, maybe I'm just different, but usually I will have an iPad for bedside, like the iPad Air. Then I have another iPad mini where I can bring it out, or I have an iPad Pro for trying to simulate something like working on a MacBook Pro. But let's try to find out what the hell am I talking about, baby. Honestly, you don't need so many iPads, but if you're crazy like me, probably you need one for reading, one for bringing out, one for trying to emulate what your work laptop can be like. But I'm here to share with you what is the cost, the performance or specifications, and importantly, the user experience so that you can make the perfect choice for yourself. So we start off by talking about the cost. I currently have 3 iPads that I use all the time, which is my iPad Air, my iPad mini, and my iPad Pro 12.9 inch, but the 3rd generation. Of course, you can get the iPad, the normal iPad 8th generation, which is the cheapest that you can get in the iPad range, or you can also go for the iPad Pros, which have the M1 or the Apple Silicon built-in, which gives you the best performance that you need. Okay, so let's talk about what I have on hand. The iPad mini that I have costs just $599, and this is the 5th generation, the latest generation, and it's $599 at 64GB with the Wi-Fi only model. And if you are going for the iPad Air will set you back at $879 for the 64GB version and Wi-Fi only as well. And my 12.9 inch iPad Pro, which is the 3rd generation, and I bought it in 2019, is a Wi-Fi and cellular model at 256GB, and that cost me about probably around $1,700 to $1,800. But if you want to get something similar, which is today's iPad Pro 12.9 inch with the M1 chip inside, that will set you back about $1,649, yes, at 128GB Wi-Fi only model. As for performance and specifications, I'm not going to bore you with the specs. I'm going to just put it up here on the screen. You can pause the video anytime and then you can compare in detail for yourself. But in general, the iPad mini uses the oldest chip here because it uses the A12 Bionic chip. But that said, the iPad Pro that I had uses the A12X. So it may be the same in a certain way, but more configured as an extreme model of the A12 Bionic chip. And the iPad Air uses the latest A14 Bionic processor. And a comparison of the screen size, the iPad mini comes in at 7.9 inch, the iPad Air at 10.9 inch, and of course my iPad Pro at 12.9 inch. All these 3 devices gives you 10 hours of general usage, so basically it can last you out throughout the whole day, unless you're doing some heavy editing stuff or watching a lot or using up the processor quite a bit, then that will shorten the frame. But general, if you're just doing simple watching videos, Netflix, internet surfing, emails, that should easily last you about 10 hours a day. Okay, now I want to talk about user experience. For me, the iPad mini is the one that is most pocketable, obviously due to its size, right? I bring out my iPhone, but sometimes the iPhone screen is just a tad too small to view properly. Let's say I want to do some quick reading on books or even magazines. The iPad mini is just about right to use. Design is a little bit dated. It still uses the classic Touch ID on the front face with the bezels all around, especially the top and bottom chins, the forehead and the chin. So this is kind of like a little bit of a dated design. But in terms of performance or user functions, it's actually still very smooth. When you watch videos, when you start swiping between apps, there is no delay or no lag whatsoever. And I find that the screen size 7.9 inch is really still quite acceptable, right? Unless you really don't like the design, which I think there is going to be a refresh coming up really soon. So if you can, you might want to hold off on getting the iPad mini for now and just see what is going to be announced during the September keynote. Then for the iPad Air, The iPad Air user experience is definitely a notch better. I find this device is a very good combination. Alright, that means you can actually still bring it out, but it's not as portable as the iPad mini, where you can just literally put this iPad mini in the back of my pocket. So the iPad Air is still pretty good. It's still very light. It's not too big, and it's technically the perfect size for watching movies or even viewing books or magazines. So I find that this iPad Air has the qualities for you to be able to bring out, but it's just that I can't pocket it as easily as the iPad mini. So this does well as my bedside device when I do some reading. And of course, the design is much more modern. It uses the new design language where Apple seems to be heading with all their devices right now. And it also has Touch ID integrated into the top button instead of being on the face. Why Touch ID is important? Because if you're bringing this device out, and most likely you'll be wearing a mask. And if you're wearing a mask, and unless you have an Apple Watch, then you can unlock the screen automatically. But if not, you will need to still key in. If you're on Face ID, you still need to swipe up and you still key in your PIN number. Right? But for the iPad Air and the iPad mini, you still have Touch ID function, so it can be helpful in that certain way. And of course, the design is way modern than the iPad minis, which have the front-facing Touch IDs. And of course, now we have the iPad Pro at 12.9 inch. Regardless to say, this will be the best device to do reading, to do your magazine, your books, but it just feels a tad too big as well. It's perfect in the sense that you get the full real estate to look at the information that you watching movies. Of course, on a bigger screen is definitely better. It's just that it's just a tad too big for you to hold it, to read it comfortably. So the iPad Air comes in to slot in at that portion. And Face ID is good when you're using it at home. It's very fast. You don't have to, you just need to swipe up and you're literally into the iPad itself. And if you want even smoother swiping, or in general, you have a faster screen, then you should go for the iPad Pros, because they have ProMotion, which comes in at 120 Hz. So at the end, who is this really for? What all these devices, all these iPads, who are they really for? The iPad mini is for someone who values portability, can sacrifice the screen real estate, but at the same time want something that is very pocketable. For the iPad Air, if you want something that is a bigger screen, but not towards the iPad Pro's 12.9 inch version with a modern look and Touch ID still in place, then of course go for the iPad Air. But if you want something to possibly replace your workstation, your laptop, or you want just as much screen real estate as possible, then the iPad Pro 12.9 inch is your perfect choice. Obviously, it's a bit more hefty and it costs much more, but it's going to be one of the best in terms of screen quality and overall user experience. And you do have the ability to turn it into a more MacBook-ish kind of device by getting the Magic Keyboard, which can turn this into a fully functional work laptop. So my final verdict is, each one of them has its own purpose and space, obviously, but if you're crazy like me, get all three. So I hope you like this video. Please like, please subscribe, and please hit that notification button so that I can churn out more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one.